moving on to Julian Assange, now that he's free and in Australia, are you satisfied with the outcome of this?
I do think it is important when we talk about Julian Assange to remind the world that the actions for which he was indicted and for which he has now pled guilty are actions that put the lives of our partners, our allies, and our diplomats at risk, especially those who work in dangerous places like Afghanistan and Iraq. This was some years ago now, almost 15 years ago, so I think the world has forgotten much of it. But if you recall, when WikiLeaks first disseminated and published State Department documents, State Department cables, they did so without redacting names. They just threw them out there for the world to see. And so the documents they published gave identifying information of individuals who were in contact with the State Department. That included opposition leaders, human rights activists around the world, whose positions were put in some danger because of their public disclosure. It also chilled the ability of American personnel to build relationships and have frank conversations with them. And at the time, those of you who covered the State Department at the time will probably remember that in the days leading up to that release, the State Department really had to scramble to get people out of danger, to move them out of harm's way. It was an extraordinary effort performed by dozens of government officials around the world, but that doesn't change the danger that those actions put innocent people all around the world in through no fault of their own. And that's, of course, not even to mention the further actions by WikiLeaks down the road to essentially serve as a conduit for Russian intelligence interfering in the US presidential election.
Sorry, so I actually did cover the State Department back then, and I don't remember there being any public, there was a public concern that was raised about the potential security risk posed to sources who might have been quoted. Was there actually any, did you ever discover anyone who was injured, killed, had to go into hiding because of them?
So a few things about that. One, I can't give you a definitive answer only because I wasn't here at the time and so much time. And
okay,
hold on. Let me finish. I have a full answer on it. Okay. One, I can't speak to that because it was some years ago, and I don't have a full accounting of what happened. But number two, the State Department did an extraordinary amount of work when we found out that these cables were going to be published to get people out of harm's way, to go around and look at what might become public and take action so people that would be put in danger would be put out of harm's way. But third, if you drive drunk down the street and get pulled over for drunk driving, the fact that you didn't crash into another car and kill someone doesn't get you out of the reckless actions and the endangerment that you put your fellow citizens in. And it's the same thing. The same principle applies here.
Right. Well, I don't think that it does. But the fact of the matter is that the State Department has been, at least as far as I know, and maybe I'm wrong, but has never been able to point to anyone who was compromised or killed or put at risk because of this.
Their identities were compromised. The State Department went to great work to get people out of harm's way, to prevent that very action from happening.
Do you know how many people about?
As I said, this was some time ago. I was in the government at the time, not at the State Department. I'd have to go back and look at it, but I do know that there was work around the world, especially in places like Afghanistan, Iraq, and other places around the world where they did have to do a great amount of work to kind of move people out.
And in the judgment, the sentencing part of the judgment, the judge noted that there were no victims of Mr. Assange's behaviour, which is part of the reason that the sentence was what it was. Do you disagree with that? Do you think there were victims of his actions?
I'm not going to speak to a comment made by a judge in a ruling. It would never be appropriate for me to do so, but I stand by the comments I made just a moment ago.
What? You're not going to speak to a comment made by a judge. I mean, if he did, I don't know that he did, but that's exactly the point of my question.
Yeah, but I'm not.
Which is that the State Department has never come up, even though it was one of the prime quote unquote victims of these leaks, was never able to identify anyone who was killed or came under.
I think the point I made a moment ago is an appropriate response to that, which is just because the State Department was able to take actions to keep people out of harm's way. People that
Okay,
he put in
so
harm's
tell
way
us
doesn't
what
absolve
actions,
responsibility.
what actions did the State Department
They were able,
take?
the State Department at the time was able to reach out to individuals whose names
many?
were going to be, I can't tell you that, it's almost 15 years ago, Matt, I wasn't here.
No doubt, but the fact of the matter is that you have not ever been able to identify anything tangible about any tangible negative effect.
That is a different. So I think I just did point to a tangible negative effect when people are less willing to trust the United States government. To
Okay,
keep
well, give me an example of that.
Information's secret.
Who was willing to?
It was a.
to
So
blab
I was in
all they wanted
I
to
was
the
in
US?
government at the time, and I can tell you, traveling the world with a different,
Okay,
a different agency. We often heard from foreign
Okay.
counterparts that they were. I'm obviously not
So
going to speak
who?
to.
I remember one, having been here at the time, and I remember that Berlusconi told former Secretary Clinton that he was concerned, mainly because of what the WikiLeaks, what the cables suggested about his activities and
There were
Lifestyle.
there were more
Yes.
there were more
But-
substantive and serious concerns. Yeah.
were there?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Can you
raised.
can you name a,
I'm
not a person?
So
maybe, but
so
country.
I think you
know,
could see why, if the point of the conversation is someone raising concern about private conversations being made public, it wouldn't be helpful for me to then make those private conversations public in response
Well,
to a
you said
question
it's
at this
15
podium.
years ago. I'll drop it.
Go ahead, Alex.
Thank you.